we need to talk about Tomb Raider 4 flare cancels. So now I'm going to be here in Temple of Karnak just to play around and show some information about flare canceling. Obviously we can pull flares and you can press flare again to throw them, and that animation cancels any stumble and you get some nice smooth quick movement. But there's also a very famous issue with Tomb Raider 4 where certain things you do can actually break this. Kind of like broken action where we weren't able to press action earlier, now we won't be able to throw our flare. So if we draw our flare and we want to try and do a flare cancel, I'm going to try and throw the flare button and she won't throw it. I'm hitting the flare button and she just doesn't want to throw it until finally there she did. This is an extremely well-known issue for anyone who has done speedruns of this game, and it's really annoying. And it's actually very complicated what causes it. In order to better understand this bug, I'm going to be using a exe made by Troye that basically tells us when we can and can't flare cancel. So let me swap to that. Now at the top you can see some text. Can throw flare? Yes. Counter is 0. Basically in the code there's this counter that goes on, and if you really want to get technical, it has to do with Lara's left arm and hand. It's very strange and too complicated, but basically when that counter is 0 in the game, she can throw the flare. And when it's not 0, she cannot throw the flare. So obviously during that animation where we're pulling the flare, we can't throw it while we're pulling it out. So there's one thing there. So that's basically how this works, and that keeps track of that in-game counter, and we'll be able to see when we can throw the flare or not. The most classic example that breaks flare canceling that I showed earlier was actually running jumps. If I do one running jump, you can see it turns no for a second after I land, and I won't be able to throw it. So if I jump, land, press flare, she's not going to throw it. Jump, land, press flare, not going to throw it. But then I can throw it after. If I continually do running jumps, it's not going to be able to get back down to 0, and it's going to stay no, and I can spam flare all I want and she won't throw it. So this shows a lot of the times it's landing from jumps that causes it to break. As you can see, it's when we land. So if I do a standing jump, it's going to be no. Standing jump, jump forward, and then do running jumps. Things like this are going to cause it to break. As you can see, when the number is really high, we can actually make it go down. Things just like normally running will make it go down, go back to 0, and it'll fix, and we can throw the flare. Sprinting is also fine for the most part. Dive rolling is fine until right near the end. As you can see, it goes up when we get out of the roll. And so, as you can see, it's really complicated. It's not quite understood why this counter goes up when you do specific things. Another thing we can see is that after sprinting and then rolling, that will actually break it. So if I sprint and then roll off, flare cancel is broken, and I can't flare cancel. If instead I just run off normally and then roll off, she can flare cancel just fine. Now if I sprint dive off something, she flare cancels just fine. Sprint diving off is good. As we can see, this is a complicated bug in the game that makes flare canceling quite awkward. That's why it's best when you want to flare cancel to try and do it last second. Do all your jumps and then pull your flare right before you're about to go and then throw it. You don't want to draw flare and then run around and standing jump and then sprint everywhere and do this and that and then finally cancel, because you'll probably get messed up. Because of the complexity of the glitch, it's hard to just give a list of things that you do that cause it to break, and you can have it fix over time. If you do running jumps and you do running jumps in a row and that breaks it, if you just walk for a bit and then jump again, then you can flare cancel. It's extremely complicated, it's hard to do, but it's good to know the basics about what causes it and what fixes it so you can kind of work around situations. If I were to give a list of more common things that break flare, continuous running jumps would be the top of the list. If you just hold jump and run around, she's not going to be able to flare cancel at all. Another one would be immediately rolling after a sprint like this. You can see it went up no there while I was rolling. So if you were to roll off a ledge, you wouldn't be able to flare cancel. Also standing jumps. A lot of times landing a jump will break it. Standing jumps will also break it quite easily. You won't be able to cancel. Another common one would be sprinting and diving and then doing a jump immediately after that. We won't be able to flare cancel after landing the jump. This is opposed to sprinting without diving and then jumping as fast as you can. You will be able to flare cancel that. Seemingly, for a lot of the instances we'll be in, it comes down to getting just a bit of a normal walking animation in before you do your flare cancel. There are flare cancels like this where we want to cancel from this jump. If we jump up here and then run a little and then jump, we can cancel just fine. Meanwhile, if we jump up here and then hold jump and jump right away, we won't be able to cancel, and we'll be stuck for a second. Or if, like I showed before, you sprint and roll off a platform immediately, you won't be able to flare cancel. So again, the fix would be to sprint and let go and get some walking in and then roll, and that'll fix your cancel. So I would say a general rule before you do a jump or a fall or a roll off that you want to cancel the stumble on the way down, try and get some normal steps in before you do it. Don't do it after continuous jumps. Don't do it after sprinting and get some normal steps in and then roll off, then jump, then do this, and draw your flares later than you probably would. Don't be running around with a flare for 20 seconds before finally using it. So those are the best tips I can give for flare canceling in Tomb Raider 4.